This one woman was crying just to get out of the inner city. Everybody there just felt trapped. And I'm crying with this woman because we have one car and no money and 2 babies. I'm going, I know, I feel trapped too. I know your pain. And so there's just, there are different seasons in marriage when you have littles, when you're starting a career, when, all of those things. Hi, you're listening to the Zan Tyler podcast.
When my family started our homeschooling journey, there were so many decisions to make, but one of our best decisions was choosing to use BJU Press Homeschool. I've never seen my kids so excited to get textbooks before. I'm amazed by how interesting and interactive the lessons are. My kids actually look forward to them. We use the online video lessons for all our courses, but I know some families choose to teach from the textbooks. What I love is that I can trust BJU Press to uphold our values. The Bible and biblical principles are woven throughout each subject. I'll admit, I was a bit nervous when I started homeschooling, but I've found a wonderful online community of other BJU Press homeschool families and consultants. The Homeschool Hub also makes my job easier. I can set up our schedules and rearrange them with just a few clicks. On the dashboard, I can see each of my kids' progress, and the assignments page shows me quickly what's ready for me to check or grade. I'm glad my son's biology assignments are automatically graded. BJU Press Homeschool has given us the tools and confidence to homeschool our children. For more information, do what I did and visit the BJU Press Homeschool website or talk with your local HomeWorks consultant.
So I want to welcome my dear friends Jan and Roger Smith to the podcast today, along with my very best friend and my husband, Joe. We are going to talk about how to have a strong marriage today, not in spite of homeschooling, but even when you are homeschooling. And we want you to keep in mind that the goal is not perfection. The goal is having strong marriages and strong relationships. The goal is not perfect children either. The goal is having strong relationships with your children. So first, Jan, tell us how long you've been married and how long you've been homeschooling.
We've been married for 43 years now. 22 of those years we were homeschooling.
So more than half of your married life. And Roger, whose idea was it to homeschool in the beginning?
Well, we were both rather abruptly introduced to home education whenever we were having a Sunday school party and some children showed up that were coming in from out of town, and we saw, not knowing what we were seeing, we saw the product, and we both were struck with these amazing children, and we were just agog, so to speak, with seeing these children and how well they interacted. And so we both were kind of almost suddenly in, but Jan is by nature the early adopter in our family, and I'm the analyzer. And so Jan said, "That's what we're doing." And I go, "I think you're right. I'm with you on this." So we almost were on it together. So we were first just totally struck with the product. They say the proof is in the pudding.
That's right.
And that was true in our experience.
Roger, I know that from our perspective, the husband and wife really love their kids. And of course, first they began their whole homeschooling journey by loving one another. But I tell you what, homeschooling can add a lot of stress to a marriage. What has been the key for your 44 years, and what has really kept you guys going strong?
Well, our biggest stress point was whenever our youngest, that was our third child, was having difficulty reading. And so anytime that there is some challenge or obstacle, then that can become a barrier between you. You kind of it becomes a friction point. But I guess for me, a way that we work to try to keep from homeschooling from being an issue between us is that I just made a rule for myself that I would not criticize anything that Jan was doing or decision that she made. But the flip side of that was, if I saw something that I didn't like, I saw it as my responsibility to work to change that. And so then it stopped the finger pointing, and that's where we get into trouble, is when we start, pointing fingers at one another and saying, well, you this, or you idiot. And so where I saw, I'm the solution guy in the family usually. And so naturally it kind of comes to me, but it also is a decision that we have to say, okay, I'm going to look for the solution rather than trying to just identify the problem. And I think that kept us
I never felt criticized or like I was on trial about homeschooling, like that he would come home and drill me or drill the kids about what we got done. Because talk about still the joy. It's hard enough to feel like you got something tangibly accomplished in a day, because there's so much time spent on character training and conflict resolution and all the things. And so sometimes there were days that I felt good about our day, even though I didn't have a lot of tangible proofs or some of my plans didn't get done, but I still had a good day. And if I'd had to be accountable every day to somebody that was coming home to check off his list, that would have been a difficulty for me and a stress point between us. He avoided that.
And I understand that, like most first married couples, time is such a premium. And I know you guys, like us, we weren't homeschooling real early on, but when our kids were really little, there was just so little time, and in our case, especially, so little money to do anything if we had that time. And I know our moms and dads out there probably are facing that with little kids as they're just starting their families. Sorry, we just lost a light, but I will attempt to shine brighter.
Let your little light shine.
In the early days, what are some things you guys did? I know that Roger, you were in medical school or doing a residency at a highly demanding time, and so your time at home was at a premium.
It was very limited, and so quite often, whenever I came home, my goal was just to have some kind of interaction with the kids, even if I was asleep on all floors and they were on all four and they were riding me like a horse. It was really exhausting days, and so we really it was a premium just to try to have some interaction, and so. And that somewhat characterized even their first years of medical practice, is that I wasn't available that much. I was out of the house, but homeschooling actually gave us the opportunity for me to have time with the kids, because they could stay up late. They could work, they could be on my schedule rather than on the school schedule. So we took advantage of that. And so I was the guy who did the bedtime routine because that was when I was available. So, and you say, does that look like school, homeschooling? Well, yes. It's relationships, and so we read books, we told stories, we did things that, and in retrospect, we may say that was schooling, but at the time we just saw it as life. And that's when I was available. And I know that it was similar for you. You were in a demanding job in the early years and were on the road. And, how did you manage?
Yeah, that was a real challenge for us too, especially for Zan, because we had been married a couple of years. We had one son. Zan was pregnant with our second. And I was about to be transferred to Belgium, of all places, to do a project over there. It fell through, and then it looked like Toronto was going to be the project, and it fell through. So we thought, oh, well, we'll just keep going and have more kids right here in Columbia, South Carolina. And lo and behold, Zan was in about her 8th or 9th month of pregnancy, and we were transferred, and we went to Philadelphia. And so she had the challenge of having 2 kids in diapers in Philadelphia and really being homebound a lot. Her pediatrician, actually, this was pre-COVID, if you can believe it, her pediatrician said, hey, there's a really bad virus going around, you really ought to keep John indoors and just don't
For
take him
6 months.
anywhere. Yeah, for 6 months.
I can remember there was a lot of trouble in inner city Philadelphia that year. So the boys were, 2 and just an infant. And this one woman was crying just to get out of the inner city. Everybody there just felt trapped. And I'm crying with this woman because we have 1 car and no money and 2 babies. I'm going, I know, I feel trapped too. I know your pain. And so there's just, there are different seasons in marriage when you have littles, when you're starting a career, when, all of those things. And Jan, I know you had a little bit of a similar situation.
I did. When we, we were fortunate to have a storybook romance during college, and in our early years of marriage were just blissful. But then end of medical school hit, our church split through about legalism. Roger started depression, and life happened. We had our first child, got pregnant with the second one, and then we moved to Kentucky, 14 hours from home. He was in a very demanding job, as is often the case for young families. When you're in the process of having children, often that's when the husband's career is most demanding. And it was certainly the case for Roger. And by the end of that first year of Kentucky, I felt pretty trapped. More than anything, I wanted my husband back. And he was just kind of a walking shell. And between the depression and the exhaustion, I just needed to think that there's hope. And I remember talking to him one day, let's talk about the future. And he said, it's always going to be this way. And I said, can you at least tell me you love me? And he said, I can't do that. And that night I cried myself to sleep. Soon after that, I realized I was really in trouble marriage wise. And I went and I talked with a godly woman. Actually, we had gone home from my sister's wedding, and I talked to his mother because I knew she knew the real Roger. Everybody in Kentucky really didn't know my husband because he was at the hospital all the time. And so she had the wisdom to give me godly counsel and said that God didn't owe me a happy marriage, that I owed God my life because I'd been bought with a price. And I know that she had lived that and had seen her husband, her marriage be healed. And she said, my counsel to you, because I'd said, Roger never noticed me. She said, my counsel to you is to become the most godly woman you can be. And that when he ever wakes up, if he notices you, you are worthy of his notice. So I went on a real journey of growth. And I read a book by James Dobson called,
Love Must Be
Love
Tough.
Must Be Tough. It had just come out. And so I changed any of my demands on Roger. I just took that off. I stopped expressing needs, and I just started loving him unconditionally and not expecting anything in return. And it was a process of years, but now we're one of the most happily married couples in America, I love to say. And some of the young girls that see us and our marriage, they say, oh, if I had a husband like yours. And I said, it wasn't always like this. When we had littles, we were hanging on by a thread.
Yep.
And so, that's my message to young couples.
Yeah, it is very demanding in those early years, very demanding.
And, even it's funny, we look at technology and stuff thinking, we look back at our parents' generation, and my dad lived through the Depression, and they used to go down and walk by the train tracks to pick up little pieces of coal to heat their house with or to sell. So I look at that compared to me, and I remember as a young married man with young family and Zan feeling so closed up at home, we were just wondering, like you guys, is this going to get better? And the good news is it does.
Yes.
Yeah, there are stages, aren't there? And the interesting thing about it is, we know and see our parents' marriages when they've been at it for 20 or 30 years. And people forget that we are the same way. We started out as less mature Christians, hopefully, than we are today. Hopefully, we've grown. But I will say your marriage grows right along with your growth in the Lord. And
Yeah.
no matter where you start from, there's always a great future ahead. And especially for families with all these young kids running around. I know what a challenge that is. I remember when we used to just long for the day that our kids were out of diapers, and we thought, oh, if they're ever just out of diapers, we will have arrived. Then we can really be awesome Christian people. Well, in fact, we were in Philly, so it was even rougher because you weren't cool and spiritual unless you used cloth diapers, because those evil plastic diapers, they can ruin your child. So any problems our kids have can be blamed right back to the ones that did those plastic diapers. So anyway, it is amazing. Looking back on it, I can't imagine with those demands on my time like we had as a young couple. And I know we used to, our thing that was great for us in Philly when it was freezing cold is we go to the mall every Friday night and buy a box of Entenmann's chocolate chip cookies. And they never made it home. You know, he just walked around the mall because the mall was really warm. They kept it like 70 degrees in there. We didn't keep our house 70 degrees. I will say this, though, people say the grass is greener on the other side of the fence, especially married couples that are struggling. And I've heard this phrase a lot. That's so true. The grass is greener where it's fertilized and where it's watered. And I know for us, when the kids were little, we couldn't do much of this, but just trying to get away once a year as a couple without the kids so we could actually talk to each other without being broken into by some crisis was a big deal to us. And, backing up for that, I really believe that husbands need to keep dating their wives, even though they come home from work, or these days, maybe they walk out of their office door there in the home, and they face all kind of issues with the kids fighting and whatever, and their wife is so looking for a break. Communication is so important, and being able to clear a schedule enough so that you can spend time together, even if it's not spending a dime.
So, how did y'all stay engaged together as a family and as a couple while you're in the midst of homeschooling and Roger's work and everything you have to do around your horse farm and all of those things?
I would love to say that we did this date night thing, and and we went on little retreats together, and and that it was idyllic. And for us, it was really hard for us to find those pockets of time, even to get a babysitter and go to something ourselves. And so that happened occasionally. It wasn't as recommended that we have a date night once a week. We never could pull that off. But what we could do is we did life together, and we made sure that we communicated, maybe even at bedtime, what our goals were for the next day or the next week, or, how did we sum up the day? Were we still on the same page, and so there were little snippets of time, but quite honestly, most of it was, we kind of just did life together as a family, and
we created fun. We'd have other couples over.
Yes.
And one of the things we did was take advantage of the free times, the free dates that we could do. Roger's always been willing to go to weddings. Joe, do you do weddings with Zan?
He does.
Oh, yeah.
He does.
That's a free dance. That's free night out to go dancing. Now, used to, you didn't get to dance at weddings. We grew up Baptist and there was no dancing. But so we go dancing at weddings. We just did that this past weekend, and it always surprised people that the homeschoolers would be the first ones out on the floor. So
yeah, and there are family events and things, and there's always an opportunity to let the kids go play and thus sit down together. But sometimes I wanted to play what the kids are playing. They were jumping on the trampoline. I wanted to get on it. And but we made sure that we were desiring the same things for our family as a unit. And it wasn't like I wanted to go do my thing. Now, I will say there was one commitment that I made to make sure that I stayed engaged is I chose not to have any hobbies that I would do separate from the family.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that said, I chose not to do golf. I'm not saying golf is a no-no. I'm just saying for me, that would take me away. I didn't have enough time as it was for the family. So what I did, I chose hobbies that we all could do together. So we went to the lake together. We did sports that we could all play together, and then we did the horse thing, so those were the habits that we had, as we tried to not get involved in things that separated us.
And we chose not to watch TV.
Yeah.
That was that gave us back so much time in the evenings as a family. And Roger would read aloud after dinner when the kids were little and they weren't big enough to help with the dishes. Later, they would help with the dishes. But when they were little, he would read aloud while I did the dishes to keep them from all going. And he did it in the kitchen where I could hear and be a part of it. Yep. And so that family table was a really big deal, a real big connection. So we had fun together, and we, most of what we did as a family. We didn't always get away as a couple per se. There were definitely some times that we did do that. Yeah, but it was not a weekly basis.
Those were the exception rather than the rule. And so together was the key word for us. That it allowed us to stay engaged, just because we found fun things together. Did you all do things that kept you stay engaged?
Well, Joe did the same thing, which I really appreciated. He really gave up. He was a big golfer and hunter. And so he gave all that up until the kids were old enough to go with him. And then he would take the boys on hunting trips or to play golf or, whatever. And he would coach their sports teams and took Lizzie to play practice. And, so it was all, it was just all of those things. And I would say with parents in town, we would maybe get out once a month by ourselves. And then he was traveling too. But, I never felt abandoned when Joe traveled. I mean, I know a lot of wives who felt abandoned when their husbands were traveling, but he was so good at communication. I mean, we didn't have cell phones then. I can remember him finding payphones in San Francisco, to call us because we needed to talk to him. And so, I just remember all of those things, and they are just the special family memories are really, really special. We did get away for a planning session with our homeschool or family life. It never worked out every year, but I would say maybe every other year. And our anniversary came. Our anniversary came right at the beginning of the new school year, and that would give us a time just to go to the mountains for a night and a day. And
that's good.
We tried to go to our homeschool convention every year together, and kind of use that time without the children to really regain perspective that we can do this and it's worth doing it for another year.
Yeah, I never really thought about the fact that when we went to the homeschool conference, the convention, we didn't take the children with us until they were teenagers. And so that was really a getaway. And it did give us kind of a mental, emotional breather. And it was always a shot in the arm. So that was our chance to have some alone time.
I hope you enjoyed part 1 of my conversation with Roger, Jan, and Joe as we discussed how to have a strong marriage in the midst of homeschooling. Don't forget to tune in next week for part 2 when Jan and Roger explain their family court system for solving disputes and disagreements between siblings. Until next time, bye.